We are.
Okay. Howard, hello.
Hello, Len.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, chaps.
Right, so tell us about your role within Spin Radio.
So, Spin Radio, I guess I've been the person that's been involved from the very beginning, so the genesis of the project. I've worked with the local young people. We sat down and said, there isn't a radio station in the community, let's create one. We found funding, we came up with the ideas, we did a whole kind of big project of getting up the logo and all that sort of stuff. And so I've been involved in that, and I help run it, and I help fund it, and I help kind of manage the whole thing.
In October 2010, it was expected that government spending cuts would affect charities the most. As a relatively new non-for-profit scheme, has this affected Spin Radio?
Yes, it has. Very much so. I'll give you an example. So projects like Spin, I think probably to run it well, and this is without staff costing lots of charging lots of their time, so volunteers running it and things. You still need about £6,000 a year. Okay, so it's not a huge amount of money. You know, you'd say that. There is, for example, in the council, every area has an area management committee, and they have a pot of money called the Wellbeing Fund. Now, usually, as a project, we could say, this is what we're doing. That money is designed to help local grassroots projects to keep going. And I could say, we'd like £4,000 for the next 3 years, £4,000 a year, to keep going. We'll raise the rest ourselves, but will you support us? That money's gone completely now because of the cuts. So there's a very concrete example of little pots of money that would make all the difference to projects like this, just literally being wiped out because of the cuts.
It was stated that the South East would be the areas most affected by charity spending cuts, but does that mean they're still not as severe up north?
It's a really good question, that. And it's quite a political question, that. So Labour, when they were in power, and I'm sure you've researched this a bit, whacked loads of money in those areas. So because there were quite a lot of industry, a lot of mining towns, all that sort of stuff, the reason the cuts affect them so much is that Labour whacked in lots of public sector jobs, right? So then those public sector jobs go. It's still difficult in the north, I think. I think this country, kind of southeast, sort of London, up the home counties way and all that, a lot of the money, a lot of the kind of the media, a lot of the finance and all that is down there. Places like Leeds are very creative, exciting cities and will make a lot of money and do okay. But the public sector in Leeds, so for example the youth service with whom we work a lot, which should be providing universal provision for guys like you and all that sort of stuff for every young person, particularly young people in communities like this where there are elements of need, there should be a universal provision. But there isn't anymore, and the reason is they're cutting and they're cutting and they're cutting. So yes, there's definitely still issues in the north. However, I mean, I was just in the West Country the other day. I'm from Somerset, and it's not just an inner city thing. This in rural Somerset, in some of those places, there's some real kind of issues with the money suddenly being withdrawn from the local library. Now, when you're in the middle of nowhere, that library is really key, much more key, arguably, than a library here, where we could always go into the city centre and see one, or go, there's loads. So the cuts are affecting everywhere, I think.
What are your future plans for the Spin Radio project then?
So, my hope is, and I think what we've managed to do is create a little project that is led by both young people and local residents. So so the ownership is there. My hope is that we will look at turning it into a social enterprise of some form or another. So one of the things we did when we run it, we try and go to the local shops and stuff and say, look, quite similar to what you do at PGFM sometimes, we'll do some adverts for you, will you give us some money? We're looking at local sponsorship and all that sort of stuff. So we're trying to say, if it costs £6,000 a year, how much of that can we bring in ourselves to keep it going? So the answer is, keep it going, but keep it going with a model that isn't just about saying, give us funding. It's about us saying, how can we creatively keep going and how can we make this financially sustainable?
Right, Ben, I'll let you field these.
So how are you funding that at the moment? How are you coming up with these?
Well, it's examples that I gave there. So we're trying to work out, we're trying to get a budget together. Could we, for example, so can we, every time we run it for 2 weeks, say it costs £1,000 to run it for 2 weeks, and you might go, well, that's quite a lot of money, but you've got freelance time for people setting up, but you've then also got licenses for the music you're playing. You've got to pay for your broadband, you've got to then have the licenses to play it online, you've got to stream it across the internet, all of that stuff all adds up. But maybe from that £1,000, maybe, I don't know, £400 of that could be local businesses paying us £10, £20 a time to play their adverts over that period. It might be that as a group of young people we say we need to raise £200 here, and we go and walk the Three Peaks or something like that and have to be more actively involved in raising funds like that. Or it might be that we go, I don't know, Farsley Celtic, for example, well they're not that now, they're AFC Farsley. They've got a pot of money. Maybe we could get them to sponsor the whole thing and bring in £1,000 from them each time. So basically, it's trying to be creative, you know. Or we say, look, we've got a great load of skill here. We've got really good equipment. Could we go and offer this service in a school, for example, a school that doesn't have a radio station? Could we take it to a community festival and charge them £500, and then that money comes back in and helps the thing run? So we're trying to look at a model that isn't just dependent on people giving us money.
Right. So, aside from all that then, you previously did some work at Quincy Grangefield School.
I did, yeah.
Media teaching.
Yeah, I did.
What made you swap the lesson plans for...
For here?
Yeah.
I think, essentially, they got rid of me. They thought I was terrible, but no, they didn't at all. What I quite like, I think actually, Quincy Grangefield do an excellent job in their media, because the very fact that you guys are here, they're really creative in how they get you to do it. It's you guys lead it, you do the thing and all that stuff. I like that, but I think I like more actually being out in the community, getting stuck in and meeting young people, wider members of the community, in their own time, on their own terms, and kind of meeting people where they're at. Within a school, there is an institution, there's a particular way of doing things, understandably so, but I think there's also a place for a project to be outside of that, so that you can be even more creative and allow young people to develop, maybe in giving them even more options. So you get some options in school, but you go down particular corridors, yeah? So you go, these are the exams that I'm doing, or whatever. Well, actually, there's not necessarily specifically a radio kind of exam, or you haven't got necessarily the experience of getting stuck in and professionally, you know, putting together a budget and running the radio station like the producer all the time and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it was just a case of, there's something good going there, but I'm a bit more of a free spirit and want to create those spaces which are a bit freer from the organisation.
Right, so being a free spirit, you got any other projects going?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're sat in the cafe that we developed, and again, this was 20 or so local young people, spent 8 weeks coming in here on the weekends, the evenings, painting, building, fixing up. We raised some money, you know, and hopefully now this will be a cafe that will self-sustain itself. So you'd need one person to work full-time, because they need to be the person with their head on managing it and all else. But also it'll be a space where, and not in the Tesco's ways where everyone was saying, oh, volunteers are working for free and all that. That, by the way, is an interesting point, isn't it, about the funding? Do you see the thing the other day when they were going, hang on, these kids are actually being made to come and work for 6 weeks. If they don't do it for 6 weeks for free, they lose their benefits and all this sort of stuff. Quite an interesting political move, and everyone's going, hang on a minute, when does that become slave labour? Well, what we're trying to do, I still think there's a place for volunteering. We're trying to set up places where people come and they get qualifications that they might say, well, we want to get to this university or we want to do this, and we'll actually tailor a little package to support them. Because sometimes when you're out of school, or when it's kind of moved on and you've finished school, it's quite hard to go, where do we go next? So for me, we're still creating spaces where we can support people to get to that next step. Festivals, radio projects, as I said, and then there's a few other little bits and bobs in the pipeline, but you can only do so much.
So you say it supports itself, does the cafe?
Yeah, so that's another example of trying to look at, you can call them development trusts, you can call them social enterprises and stuff like that. So, you know, a corporation or a company will exist in order to make money for people. I mean, it's the essential idea of capitalism, isn't it? You know, we make profit, we keep it going, and that's the motivation. Social enterprise, they don't always work, because it's quite difficult. We'll run something really well, really excellently. You know, so I'm very proud to say we just got our 5 stars hygiene and stuff in here. Surprised me. They obviously didn't look under the cupboards, but did you not know that? It's very good. But you should be able to run something excellently, and then, but say we get £4,000 or £5,000 profit, okay, which we might do, we might not. But if we manage to do that, then where do we put that money? Do we put it in the pockets of the people that run it, or could we say actually that could go to support another opportunity for other people, or that could go to develop a space where, you know, I don't know, there's all sorts of potential. There are reading clubs or even kind of internet cafes. We've got our bus parked out there. Could that develop into a space? But what you do is you raise the money yourself via social enterprise, and then you redistribute it whilst listening to the community and say, let's change things. Yeah. It's difficult though, because if the cafe doesn't run right, you're not guaranteed $5 at the end, are you? You might actually be in debt, because so you've got to run things on business principles. So you've got to cost cut even, not cost cut, do all that, but then hopefully come up with some money at the end and say, this is what we do next.
Right. So, lastly, just to finish on charity again.
Yeah.
What do you think the government's overall view on charity work is?
I think any government will say that they're really supportive of it, and that you know, they really like it, because it's obviously a nicely thing to do. I think any government, and I think this one included, is massively cynical about it as well, to be perfectly honest. Charity is so important. But if I ask myself, is this government doing everything it can to enable the charity sector, the voluntary sector, to really thrive and do all that? And it's not just even about throwing money at it, it's about how you set up structures to support it and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Is it doing that particularly well? I don't think so. I don't think so in any way, shape or form. Difficult one, but I see a lot more cuts and a lot more deconstructing of good things than I do of positive new things beginning.
Right, Howard Bradley, thank you for joining us today.
Can I just say, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. We've always wanted you on the programme.
Thanks very much. Right, boys, thank you.